Ladies, gentlemen, and intergalactic persons of interest, as always, I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing Soul Trader, an indie strategy/simulation game that brings in a variety of features from all different kinds of genres, taking strong inspiration from games like 1984's Elite. It's a game that has been in development for the better part of 5 years, with its Kickstarter helping it over the final few hurdles. The game was a solo effort by ex-Elixir employee Chris Parsons, and now the game has finally launched on Steam, but is it any good? Well, let's find out. Soul Trader takes the ideas of nepotism and it's not what you know, it's who you know to a whole other level and places them in its core design. Information is also a big thing, and the idea of information brokering is also in the game's core design. Information is king and is traded and as valuable as money in this game universe. Learning secrets, blackmailing people, building influence with people in power is as important as flying around and shooting asteroids and pirates. The game randomly generates over 200 years of history each time you start a brand new game. Now what you end up with that is your very own little pocket universe that is completely unique to you and will be different each and every time you play with a random seed generation. It also generates an entire cast of characters, an entire universe of characters for you to meet and interact with, and that in itself is a pretty impressive feat for a game developed by one man. I really like the idea that the game's focus and its core almost refinement is in its relationship building and using information to build relationships and gain influence into society, and it's a nice change from more traditional strategy simulation games which are either usually focused more on the combat or the more on the economic side, and this time it's about relationship building, which is something unique, and that in itself stands the game apart from its competition, which this year is some pretty heavy hitters, things like No Man's Sky and Master of Orion and things like that. You know, this little indie entry does stand apart in that regard alone. And once you actually start a new game, you start off choosing certain events in your childhood and early years, choosing your parents. These choices form the basis of your starting character and your location and your family and your personal contacts, personality traits and reputation. You can also choose several endgame objectives for your playthrough, so you can try and become the president of the Old Federation. You can try and become the most infamous pirate. You can try and become rich and famous. It's all what you want to do and how you want to do it. And Soul Trader doesn't really hold your hand in any particular regard or give you a linear path to achieve that objective. It's down to you to get what you want. You start off with a very small sum of money in the bank. Now you can start off with a ship, however you get less money taken away. The game was designed in the first place to start with you not having a ship to get off planet, so you'd have to either hire a ship, take a loan out to buy one, or borrow one from a personal friend or family member. Now the game has added in the option to start with a ship with some monetary debuff in that regard. However, it is a little bit cheating in that regard. I think personally it is better to start off with no ship because that's how the game was intended, and the only reason that was put in the game is because the developer received some feedback that people said it's too hard to get a ship and it was too frustrating and it was too slow getting started. And that's true of the game in general though. The game is a very, very slow paced game. It's a game about talking to people and then going back and forth between people and swapping information and trying to get what you want and influence people to do things for you. And in that regard, it is a very, very slow paced. If you're looking for a fast paced game with a fast progression, you ain't going to find it here. On the planet side of things, it's all just menus and walls of text after walls of text, and that's all there is to see. There's nothing particularly nice. I don't particularly enjoy the menu system. I think it's a little bit unintuitive. There's too much going back and forth, and you can pin things to the top bar, but that bugs frequently, so that when you click on it, it either crashes the game or has a problem of just not showing up. And I really don't like the menu system. It's just so it doesn't flow well. It has no real fluidity to it, and it would have been nice to have a complete redesign of that to make it more user friendly. Once you've managed to get a ship and decided to leave the drow politics of planets behind, you can fly off and the game transforms into a 2D top-down space shooter, very similar to Asteroids in that kind of. It does have a very retro feel about it. The combat is somewhat satisfying, somewhat frustrating in the sense that movement is very hard to do with the WASD keys. It'd be interesting to see if the developer adds controller support after the release and after a few patches. Controller support would work fairly well for this game, I feel. The combat itself, it's not bad. It's just difficult to control your ship, and not only that, the problem lies in that some ships are horrifically slow, some ships are horrifically fast, and there's not a great balance in between. Travel times when you're in space can be long and boring, especially early game when you do not have a fast ship. Even worse, and probably the most biggest glaring oversight on the developer's part, was the fact that there's no galactic map, meaning that should you get a mission off-world, you have no idea where to go. It's just plain and simple. And people say, well, it's about exploration, right? Well, that's fine, but the problem is the game is based around personal relationships and reputation, and all these delivery missions and stuff like that, they're all timed, so you have to complete them within a certain time frame. So if you have no idea where you're going, or not even the nicest hint of the general direction you're supposed to be going, you could go in the completely opposite direction of the universe, and then by the time you realize you're going in the completely opposite direction that you're supposed to be going in, it means that the mission's done and you've lost reputation, and it creates an embarrassing event, and you're just not going to progress. It's not that easy to progress that way, and it's just a glaring oversight. I'm not asking for, a complete point-to-point where I'm supposed to go, but a galaxy map with the general locations of planets so that I could plot my own route would have been nice, and I think is just a really odd decision to leave out, and I don't know why that has been left out, and it really does hamper the travelling, because it makes you not want to travel or not to take on missions, because ultimately the success failure rate of the missions is really bad, because you just don't know what you're doing, you don't know where you're going, and it is a problem in the long run for the game's enjoyability, because it just becomes frustrating, chorish and boring. Graphically, the game looks okay, particularly the 2D top down. There's some really nice ship units, there's some really nice locations. Audibly, there's not much right to home about, because ultimately it's not professionally musically scored, it doesn't have an epic score. It would have been really nice for the game to have a really fantastic soundtrack just to accompany that space feeling, but ultimately it doesn't, but it does the job quite nicely. Performance wise, the game runs well. The problem is it has a ton of bugs, and for me at least, frequently crashed pretty much nearly half an hour into a game every single time. This is a real problem, and the bugs definitely need ironed out. But barring that, the game really doesn't have any frame rate issues or issues. The only major issues are the crashing and the UI problems, and the overall UI, like I've said, is a problem in and of itself. The game certainly does have several pressing issues, and they frankly cannot be ignored. That being said, however, the random nature of the game, with its completely 200 years randomly generated universe each and every time, unique information system, it does create a game that has a certain charm, and it has an unbelievable scope considering that it was built by one person. Soul Trader literally does take little bits of features and mechanics out of different genres, and it's created something that feels a little bit new and very retro at the same time. Like I said, the pressing issues cannot be overlooked, such as the lack of navigation tools and stuff like that. But I think that the game's core focus, the idea of building contacts and relationships and investing in people so that you yourself become more influential and people do things for you, and you're investing in friendships so that you can get something out of it, is really a breath of fresh air in a genre that has never been particularly inventive or good at doing diplomacy, and it's quite nice, and it has a certain amount of depth to it that really appeals. Considering that the issues, like I've mentioned, and its rough visage overall, I think that the game does contain a little gem somewhere hidden, and it's rough as hell, don't get me wrong, and I think it does need a good bit of polishing yet, which no doubt the developer will do in future patches. But what it does offer is surprising freedom and depth. It's a strategy simulation that it certainly has enough to it to appeal to many different players because of the variety of playstyles that you can employ. The focus on information and relationships definitely has set it apart from the pack in that regard, and I think that ultimately it is a game that is probably worth a try in the long run. I think that there's definitely a couple of issues that need sorted out. First and foremost, the technical issues, the crashes and the bugs need ironed out, but once they're done, I think it's definitely worth giving a try if you enjoy strategy simulations in that regard. If you don't like slow-paced games and lots of text, you're probably not going to be that big into Soul Trader, but if that is your thing, then it's definitely worth a go, because I think underneath all the problems that it does have, there's a game that has a lot of charm and a lot of love put into it. So that is my review of Soul Trader. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Do like, subscribe and leave a comment, and I will see you next time.